seatbelt.
Hands up.
Seatbelt.
Seatbelt, step out.
I'm
And
opening the door.
You can take
I'm
mine
opening the
off
door.
of me right here on my right. I'm keeping my fucking hands up.
I'm not reaching for no gun, bro.
Step out.
Can I move my phone?
Yeah, that's crazy.
Welcome to Dissecting Tyrone. I'm Jason.
I'm Brandon.
And today is episode 3, Driving While Bud, being a black man in America.
Man, oh man.
Man, even saying that just kind of, just makes you think about things that you've been through. Well, let me just start by saying we're not here to tell Bud's story. That's his story to share. We don't know the facts of everything. Also, I want to start by saying that the views that are expressed today,
Right.
are those of our own individual views. They do not reflect the views of any company I work for, any organization that I'm a part of, any businesses that we own. Like, this is just how we feel. We're just breaking down how we feel.
And we look at this as a safe space. Like we said from day one, this is a safe space for us to talk, be able to vent, say what's on our mind. I know a lot of times we talk about relationships on this podcast, but this, like he said, this is Dissecting Tyrone. So anything that a black man in this world is going to face, and it's important to us, we're going to talk about it. We're going to try to be that voice, and hopefully we can help out and create some positive change in this world.
Definitely. And, man, to some people, driving is just I like to relax when I drive. I like to drive to relax. So, I'll put on some music, especially if it's like a nice night and the windows are down and the air is cool. I'll put on some music, some Maxwell, and I'll just go driving around. Like, driving is relaxing to me. And to a lot of people, especially when you're young, it's a freedom. And then there's the sad reality that for a lot of black men in this world, it's also a risk. Right.
And that's the first freedom that I know I felt. It was one of those things, just eager at 13, like, hey, Mom, can I drive? She kind of let me start driving her around to the back of the house. And from there, once I got a little bit better, and it was like all summer, I had work, bust my butt. I got a 1981 two-door Caprice Classic. Man, I got the money for it. I got the money for my insurance, and then boom, paid for it. And once I got those keys, I called one of my best friend at the time and was like, hey, you ain't gonna believe it, I got it. He ran from his house probably like 6 or 7 blocks all the way to my house, out of breath, but he seen it, and it was up from there. And like I said, just being able to have that freedom and cruising and just loving life, because this is something new to you and you're able to explore and just see something different. Like, it was very, very important, like shaping me and who I am as a young kid at the time, and up until we had those first experiences.
Man, first let's touch a little bit on Bud's situation. Again, we're not going to go into great detail because that's his story to tell. We don't know the facts of everything. We just know what was put out on social media. But from what I understand and what was said on social media, they were leaving the after party. First of all, for people who are not in Omaha, Bud is the GOAT. One of the GOATs. He's on the Mount Rushmore for boxing. And the city had just threw a big parade for him on his behalf to celebrate his big win against Canelo.
Second key to the city,
who he destroyed, for the record.
Right.
Destroyed Canelo. But second key to the city, and then there was a big party for him because it was his birthday also coming up. And they were just leaving that event, and it was said that they were pulled over for reckless driving, which I think is a point of contention with most people in the black community. Not that nobody's like saying, oh, something didn't happen or maybe he wasn't speed. Like, nobody's saying that. I don't know. So I can't speak to that. But the fact that there's never details involved, like, hey, this is what he was doing. I think that already puts people on a foot of mistrust. Like, okay, what are they making up? Not that they are making anything up, but that's where it puts us.
It's too loose. Like, it's with someone with his caliber, his celebrity, and not saying that celebrities have a past, but you at least would put something out to validate the reason why you pull someone over and give some context to it. So I think that's what kind of started getting people up in arms, and we're like, hey, what's going on? And I think the biggest thing to point out, Bud is one of those individuals who's big time Omaha everything. So you may see him out and about at the mall. I've run into him a couple times at the mall, quick head nod, hey, what's up, champ? Seen him up at Northwest High School and just all these different places. So he's one of the ones that actually gets out in the community, who loves his community. And to hear that someone gets bumped up on some quote unquote reckless driving, we needed that context.
Yeah, I agree. And I will say maybe it's going to come later.
Right.
Because I've met personally with our new mayor, and he seems very upstanding, and I respect him. You know, we had a great conversation. And I do know this. Smarter, from everything that I know, is respected in the black community.
Oh, for sure.
Because, you know, Smarter is a respectable person, you know, and if somebody's wrong, he will fire them. Like,
Right.
a lot of people don't understand the dynamics behind it, that, you know, he might let somebody go, but there's legal processes and the things that might bring people back, or, you know, things, but he will let you go if he feel you're wrong, and he will do, in my opinion, a good investigation and find out what's going on. So I do respect Smarter, and I do respect his processes, and I do know that he will not cover for you.
Right. And I can also speak to that because his brother, I used to work with his brother in corrections some years ago, stand-up guy back then, and just nice, even keel, and definitely fair. So I would validate exactly what you're saying, that I think he'll take a situation, look at it in its totality, and make the best sound judgment and opinion to move forward.
Correct. And I just say that, I start by saying that because we don't know what's going to happen and what they're doing. So they said there's going to be a thorough investigation. I'm the type of person where I like to wait and see, you know, what comes from what they do before I become outraged. But to move forward with the story, he was allegedly pulled over, or not allegedly, he was pulled over. But one side is saying that there was a gun spotted on the floor. The other side is saying that they announced that they had legal firearms. We do know his security team was in the vehicle with them. From my understanding, again, from what was being said, that they had security dress on, so like you knew they were security. Also, there was something put out that there was no tint on the windows, so you could see through the windows, you could see who was in there, and everything was visible. And somehow, when the video picks up, there's a video out. When the video picks up, there's a gun pointing at his head, asking him to step out the car.
Right.
And I think that was a big trigger for a lot of people in our community, because driving while black has been a thing since my father was a child.
Even before that, I mean, past the Jim Crow era, when vehicles would start hitting the street, I mean, if you were quote unquote in the wrong place at the wrong time with the wrong color, then that was a combination for whatever was going to happen. And I think even more so, unless you live under a rock, I find it highly unlikely that you work for a police force that was just attending to not only the parade, not only the after speech that he had, but then also there were heavy police presence at his birthday celebration. So with all of that being said, and you see a face, and I'm assuming you're going to run plates, you're going to see what's what, you're going to know who this person is. So still, outside of something that's warranting you to pull a firearm, you have to use better judgment. And if you're basically drawing down on someone first and then asking questions last, that creates a hostile situation. And the person on the other side of that gun who doesn't have that same gun pointed at them, you can only imagine what's going through that person's mind, and they're racing. And thankfully, he remained calm. He did what he needed to do. And all parties, the biggest thing is all parties that were in that vehicle were able to walk away with their lives, because in a lot of times, had that not been a Bud Crawford, we don't know what would have happened.
Yeah, Castro.
Right.
Was it Philando? Was
Philando
that
Castro.
You know, Sandra Bland. Like, there's plenty of situations to where the people didn't make it home.
Right.
You know, and again, I'm not trying to put that on that officer that pulled him over. I don't know what the intentions were. They'll figure that out through the investigation. But I do know the optics, and I do know how it feels to have a gun pulled on you by a police officer. Also, I will say this: I have a concealed carry permit. I carry legally. I have tons of friends that have concealed carry permits that carry legally. I know a lot of friends that are gun enthusiasts, and we've all had these conversations more recent with this situation that happened. And out of all of us that have been pulled over, none of us have had that experience. Most of us, you know, if they announce, again, I don't know which side is true. They'll figure that out when they watch body cam and stuff. But if they did announce we have guns legal guns in the vehicle, I've never seen an officer draw his weapon.
Never.
Never. I've seen officers, and even stories of my other friends have said, they're like, hey, keep your hands where I can see them.
Right.
What side is your firearm on? Where is it
Where's
at?
it at? Yep.
They remove you from the car. They do take your firearm, and then usually you get it back after the stop and everything. But usually when you say we have legal firearms in the car, I've always felt like it put cops at ease to know that, okay, this person isn't somebody who's trying to harm me. This is somebody who is exercising his rights and has a legal firearm. He notified me that he has it, which we supposed to do when you have.
That's rule number one, because if you
permits.
don't, that's grounds for getting your concealed permit terminated.
Right.
You were taught that in the class.
And let me say this too, because we don't know the whole story. I don't know if these gentlemen had concealed carry permits. They said they had legal firearms, and now you do not need a permit to carry. I still think people should get their permit and take classes and things like that. But so having a legal firearm doesn't necessarily mean they had their concealed carry permit.
Correct.
I'm just speaking from that because I do have mine.
And I do the same thing. And I think in my boat, I've been pulled over a couple of times. And the first thing that I do, I roll the window down. Officer approaches, already have my information. Like, hey, I do have a concealed permit. I do have a firearm on me. They say, okay, well, where is it at? I point to it. I show them my concealed permit. They can already run it because it's attached to your registration and everything else. So they're already, you tell them that puts them at ease a little bit more, because now they know when they're approaching you that, okay, this person legally can have a concealed permit. Now it's up to them to let me know if they're going to be straightforward and let me know. So a lot of people probably don't know that little piece, but from the jump, a police officer pulls you over, state trooper, whomever, they run those plates. They know that you have a concealed permit.
Which is why I also let them know if I don't have a firearm.
Right.
Which usually I do. But if I don't, I'll say, I do have a concealed carry permit. I do not have my firearm on me. But again, usually that communication helps put them at ease and lets them know, like, hey, I'm a law-abiding citizen. I'm not a criminal. I may have been stopped for a traffic violation, but, there's nothing else that's going to take place here.
Right.
So I'm very big on announcing. So if they did announce, I've never, and the friends I've talked to have never had an experience to where the cop appeared to be hostile over it and pointed a gun. Now, if he saw a gun and that wasn't announced, I can understand it a little more, because then it's like, this gun here, I don't know what's going on. So I think it's really going, for me, it's going to really come down to, was it announced or was it not? And if it was like they stated, then this was 1,000% a little bit much for me.
And I think the key is, both of us have somewhat of a law enforcement background. I have an extensive military background. And first and foremost, anytime that this is the saying, you pull your weapon, you should intend to fire. So if there's not something that is making you pull this weapon, or if you just see something, you could put your hand on your weapon. You always stay ready. But to actually draw down and actually, what's being said, point it to someone's face, you're escalating it to the point to where the next step is lethal force.
Correct.
And unfortunately, a lot of times things in we get it, split you only have a split second to make any type of reaction. However, at the same time, you also can't use fear alone to pull a weapon or to do something outside of the ordinary. You still have to follow procedures, policies and procedures, whatever those look like for that municipality. But at the end of the day, something like that, you're seeing who this is. If there's really nothing, again, the reports aren't out, but if there's nothing that warrants that, to escalate it on level 10 from there and then try to walk your way back, that's a scary situation for anybody to go through.
Especially for a traffic stop.
A normal routine traffic stop.
We do know that a traffic stop can turn worse. So again, I'm not questioning whether officers should be on high alert, because they don't know what they're walking into. And I do have sympathy toward that, because, they don't know what they're walking into. And a lot of times the public don't understand, levels of resistance, use of force. They don't understand those things. So what they might think is something should require this, the protocol says it requires this, which might be extreme to us. So because people don't understand that, there can be a lot of miscommunications and a lot of misunderstandings during all this. So again, I'm not saying that an officer shouldn't be on high alert, but by the same token, to watch a traffic stop go from reckless driving to guns pointed at this man's head after everybody in the city knows who he is. And so I think when people hear he was later identified as Terrance Crawford, I think that makes people feel like, and it could be true. Maybe this officer isn't a boxing fan and doesn't watch the news and doesn't watch TV and was off duty that morning. Like, there could be a variety of reasons why he doesn't know who he is. However,
The likelihood.
most people, myself included, find that hard to believe.
Right.
This man's face has been plastered over billboards. It was a free fight on Netflix, so
Right.
everybody was watching. Like, everybody knows who he is. So I think a lot of people. There's been a lot of comments. I'm not saying this is how I feel, but I've seen a lot of comments where people would say, they just still want to make sure that they let you know
They put you in your place.
your place.
Right. As a black man, no matter how high you climb, at the end of the day, in some people's eyes, you still a nigga, unfortunately.
Yeah, and that's what it is. Get into a couple of our questions. We were supposed to start with this, but we kind of just went off on that because, the reality is there is a trauma response involved with this. When you get pulled over by the police, by the cops, I don't know many black people, but especially black men who don't get tense, who don't get worried, who don't get concerned, who don't, there's a lot that start recording, they put their phones on record and, they have, there's a whole video on YouTube that teaches people how to create a shortcut on your iPhone that says I'm getting pulled over, to where your screen goes black, it starts recording, it notifies, it sends a text message to somebody that you have in there, and it's this whole prompt of basically a fear response, because a lot of people are afraid they don't know what's going to happen,
Or they're gonna come home.
right? And I have a lot of white friends that feel like we're overreacting, but I'm like, man, I have 4 sons. And all of them but one is driving. And you have a son. And I don't know if you had this talk with him yet, but we've all had to talk with our sons who drive about how to survive a police encounter.
Right. What to do, what not to do. And the simple fact that this is a majority issue in the black community. There are single parent mothers that are telling their sons this. There are dual parent households that are telling their sons this. Everyone is doing this, and the simple fact that we have to go through this progression and nothing has stopped over however many decades and decades and decades, that in itself should ring a bell in someone who maybe on the outside is like, oh, it's not that bad, but just put yourself in these people's shoes, in our shoes, and walk through these progressions. You literally walk out the house and thinking everything is good, driving down the street, you can get a police officer who is either having a bad day or has a bad agenda, and in a split second, your life can change forever.
And I'll say this too. I think movies, music, I think it all plays into it, because you can have an officer who's not racist. He's not racist. He didn't wake up today thinking I'm going to kill somebody, or I'm going to shoot somebody or have this encounter. But because every movie, or not every, but a lot of movies we watch, show minorities as violent, as gang members, we always play those roles. A lot of our music is riddled with, murder and shooting and violence and all this stuff. So I think a lot of times that society as a whole has these guys who might not be racist, who might not have a ill intent, but it creates a level of fear in them. Like, hey, I'm just trying to do my job. I just want to go home. Is this going to be my last day? Because I pull over this guy who looks like a gang member, because he looks like the image that was portrayed in these gang movies that I watched.
Yeah, so I also...
Not saying it's okay.
No, for sure.
I'm just saying we're all human.
I think the biggest, it is conditioning on multiple levels. One of the things that I always have said since forever, in my opinion, when police a community that they don't live in, it's a lot easier for you to act any kind of way, because and I'm not saying that it's going to happen with everyone, but you don't have a connection to that community. And you can interchange the ethnicity or anything. You can take for example, let's say you take a black or a Hispanic cop and you put them in a predominantly white neighborhood, and they quote unquote go rogue, and they're just pulling people over because, oh, you're a white person, let me go ahead and pull you over, let me do this, then you can kind of see where this is going. But generally speaking, when you have a inner city, mostly populated by black folks, at the end of the day, if people don't look like you and they're not in your community, it's very, very hard to understand or even feel the culture. So a lot of times what happens is somebody can get pulled over. It's like you're just another number. There's no real connection. So that right there, if you're looking at it from a humanity perspective, that's an issue. Like, we need to connect better with people. You strip the police officer uniform, just people in general. If you're not connecting or you're not meeting people where they're at, it's kind of hard to move forward in this crazy world that we live in. And I think that is one of the key things where, for example, if you work a specific North Omaha and you don't live in close proximity, that's a problem. I'm not saying that you have to live there, but if you do, you're more likely to understand more what's going on in that community.
Right. And I will say, too, this is why I always preach. Whenever the police department is hiring, I share it a million times, and I push it, and I tell everybody, if you want to see better in our community, we have to police our own communities.
Right.
And again, that doesn't mean that, white officers are bad or they can't come police. They definitely, can. But like you said, when you come from that environment, I think there's a different level of understanding. And again, I feel like a lot of those messages that are put out there, like I said, we always play the gang roles and stuff like that. I feel like when you come from the community or when you're close to the community, that's not all true.
Right.
That everybody dresses hip hop, and hip hop doesn't equate to gang member.
Right.
But when you see that in the movie, everybody who's dressed in hip hop is a gang member.
Right.
It's just a fallacy that pushes that what we feel is an agenda.
Right.
But let me ask you this. This was supposed to be our first question, but how does being a black man shape the way you move through the world, and how do you feel you're perceived by others?
At this age of 40 plus, the way I move as a black person, a black male in this world, I actually embrace it. So it's one of those things I'm aware of surroundings just because of my upbringing, bringing from a military perspective, just life in general, a little bit of law enforcement. But I try to walk around not living in fear, not being a prisoner of my own society. But at the same time, when I see things that need to be addressed, I'm observant, number one. I make sure that I kind of assess that situation, process what's going on, so I could deal with it accordingly. Because, like, you have kids that you need to come home to. I have a son that I need to come home to. So if there's a situation to where, like, I don't need to puff out my chest to prove anything. I could talk to you. Now, if I need to get active, I can get active, but that's not going to be the first thing. So when I'm cool and collective and in my own skin and walking amongst these streets or amongst this world, I embrace exactly who I am as a black male, because I think it is very important to show that example. People see it. You can feel the energy. So that's how I move about. Now, as far as coming across with any conflict, I try to use education. So if there's something that I don't necessarily agree with, I'll take the time to educate myself to say, okay, well, nah, I don't like that. I've looked at 5 different sources. These 5 sources are pretty spot on. Now I'm going to debate you, or at least I'm going to try to state my case instead of throwing the hands first. And again, hands should be the last resort, especially as you get older, as you get smarter. But I think it's just one of those things of just making sure that I have a sound mind and a body, and I just embrace who I am, and I walk across this nation the way that I do. So,
yeah, I agree. I'm very proud to be a black man. Very proud. I teach my children to be proud to be a black man. Also let them know that that's not the entirety of your identity.
Right.
You still are a human being. You still have to operate in the world with everybody and love everybody. And it's not about, I don't feel like being proud that you're an African American means that you feel like you want to be or need to be separate from everybody else. Right. I don't believe that at all. As a matter of fact, being biracial, because my mom is white, my dad is black, I'll get a lot of, of my white friends that'll say, well, you're white too. And I think this goes to the second part of the question. It says, well, how do you feel you're perceived by others? And I think that they don't realize that, yes, I am white too, but I'm perceived as black.
Right. One drop.
That's
all it takes.
And there were laws back in those days that said,
one drop of blood,
right?
You are considered a Negro.
And a lot of people don't realize that some of those laws were created because back in the days, you got an inheritance based on who your father was. And because there was, rapes
Mm-hmm.
and things like that from slave owners to female slaves, and there were biracial children being born, that some of those children as they got older try to stake claims to the white inheritance because their father was white. And a lot of those laws got passed so that the product of rape through slavery and everything like that couldn't benefit from their who their father was.
Stacking that deck.
Yeah, so it's crazy, but because of that, we were always considered just black. So society doesn't view me as, oh, he's white too.
Right.
When I've been pulled over by the police, I didn't feel like it was because, well, he's white too, so we're gonna give him a different experience. I got the experience of being black.
Right.
Driving while black, driving while Bud. I got that experience.
Yep.
And so I'm perceived as black. I was raised in the black community. I was raised black. I am a proud black man, period.
Right.
I do acknowledge that I'm biracial in my white side, and the closest family, I'm closer to my white side of the family, because that's who I was, raised by, my mom and everything like that. But I am a proud black man.
Right. And as far as what I think society perceives me as, I really don't know. I know I take care of business. I do what I need to do. And I'm always, and I think I've said it before, I'll give anybody, the benefit of the doubt. I don't care what color you are, what origin. If I meet you, I'm going to give you that benefit of the doubt, meaning I'm going to give you a fair shot until you show me otherwise that I shouldn't. So as far as what society perceives me as, I really don't know. I really don't care, because that's how I lead off. And again, it could be a black person who I may have a bad experience with. Guess what? I'm going to move accordingly. It could be a white person. It's the same thing. I can have great experiences. If I do, okay, cool, shake your hand, however we do a business deal, and we keep it moving. But outside of that, like I said, I don't really worry about what the outside noise, because I think if I do, then that would consume me so much to where now I'm trying to fit in a box that was not meant for me to be in.
Right. No, I agree. And I think people got to realize too is, when you are black, you always get reminders that you're black.
Oh.
I remember being in middle school. We moved to Shelbyville, Tennessee. I think I was 6th grade.
That sounds like some bullshit.
It was 6th or 7th grade. We moved to Shelbyville, Tennessee to be closer to my grandparents. And I didn't know that my grandfather was racist. I didn't know. And because he didn't really interact with us, but he wasn't mean to us either. And I remember me and my sister, we all went to the laundromat because the laundromat was in town. And when we went to the laundromat, my grandfather said, hey, when we go in here, you niggers act like y'all don't know me. I got friends in here. Promise you, man. My blood grandfather, my mom's
crazy
dad.
work.
And so it's just a reminder that, like, yeah, you know what, you might have my blood in you, but you still black. And I remember too. I remember going to the corner store, and they used to have these little chocolate covered bonbons, and they would be in this plastic container that had no wrappers or anything. You just reach in and grab it. People didn't care about germs back then like they do now.
Right.
But you just reach in, grab how many you want. But the nickname for this candy was called Nigger Toes. And it said it on, they had a handwritten card on the box that said Nigger Toes. So you would go in there and you'd ask for some Nigger Toes, and that's what they gave you. And this was how society was back then. Like small town, Shelbyville, Tennessee.
The crazy thing is they label them Nigger Toes, but they were smashing them and eating them up. The irony in that's crazy.
Yeah,
right?
they loved them.
They loved them. So
Yeah,
to try to degrade someone or make a mockery or a joke, but then you still enjoy that says a lot about the person or the people who are eating this or participating in this crazy mess. So you said something. So I'm assuming, was that your first experience of racism that you actually knew about?
I would say yes, because in growing up in Omaha, while there are, racist people here and things like that, it's really passive here.
Which is, I don't like it. I would prefer
to
be up front, like it's deep south, because here you could be cool with someone and then the next thing you know, they stab you in the back or something's happening. You like, well, where did this come from? And then they try to turn their back and go run like that. I don't like that. I would prefer if you
To
gonna
know.
stand on business, stand on 10 toes.
Hey, I knew this. I knew how my grandfather felt.
Right.
And I didn't go try to hug him or sit in his lap no more. I tell
Right.
you that.
Right.
I like to know where I stand.
Yep.
You know, but I just say that to say that society has always had a way of letting you know that you black.
I think so. My very first experience that I could remember, I believe it was third or fourth grade. I think I was at Adams Elementary, and I'll never forget. Can't remember the kid's name, but he was a sixth grader. I think I was a third grader. And the one thing, like I said, I'll definitely give my mom credit. She always would instill, "Hey, you're black, you're powerful, you're beautiful." Like she always spoke that life into me. So I think that's to that other question. That's why I could walk around this earth knowing that I don't have to bow down to anybody. I could meet you as an equal. We could shake hands. But if you think you're superior to me, you actually got the right one, because now is go time. But I was new to the school, and I was I think in front of the school, and this sixth grader came over and he looked at me. He was like, "What are you doing over here, you little nigger?" And I'm like, "Huh?" And I was like, "What did you just call me?" But luckily my mom had kind of already prepped me for this. Now we're going from schools in the inner city, or quote unquote the hood, so it's people that look like me. A few it was somewhat mixed, but then now going to Adams Elementary, where it's like maybe a smaller population of black kids, mostly white kids. So the first thing I said, it was goofy, sounds goofy. I was like, "What'd you call me?" And he said it again, doubled down, and I knew his brother was in my class. And I said, "Man," I said, "I'll throw you around like a sack of potatoes." But I stood up, and it was a dumb. If you think about it now, you laughing. But he looked and was like, I never heard that before. So like he kind of stood down, and I walked over to him and was like, "You better not say it again." But thankfully, as soon as he said it, I think I told the teacher, then I told my mom. The next day, they got whatever going, what they had going, and then I remember getting a apology from his parents and him, and the whole school was like, "Oh my God." But I'm thankful that my mom handled it the way that she did. She didn't have to get up there, go act ignorant. I don't know what words were said on the phone, but she basically got them to apologize, and that was kind of, of a win. But then she sat me down and said, "Son, that doesn't just start from nowhere. That's taught." And then that's where the games start clicking and changing. It's like, man, these things are taught. Like, why would somebody teach their kid to say this? And maybe they heard it, or maybe they thought it was funny. But like I said, third grade was my first experience, and it was just crazy. And obviously it didn't stop. I still see pockets of it today. And in my teens, 20s, and 30s, I definitely experienced. But now it's just subtle, like you said, just subtle. Because I think it's just a changing times. People still are trying to do business, but on the back end, they really don't mess with you because they don't have your best interest.
Especially in today's cancel society, like people, it's a lot more subtle because people don't want to be canceled. You know, so they know they can get canceled for things like that. They're a little more, they hide it
discreet
a little better.
With it. Yeah.
But I wanted to talk about that because I do want people to know, because I know a lot of my white friends, because being biracial, I feel like a lot of my white friends feel more comfortable asking me questions that they want to ask black people. So I'll have these conversations, and I'm very big on educating. I know people feel like we shouldn't have to educate somebody, or I'm not going to waste the time to educate them. They better not talk to me. Like, I get that. I respect you if you feel that way. I just feel that, to me, education really is the key. Like, understanding each other and having these talks, and learning that, like, most of my white friends think when you're biracial that the correct term is mulatto, which I think the dictionary says it is. But I don't know any biracial kid that likes to be called mulatto. Like, we look at that as derogatory, most of us. Most of us, not everybody. But so having those conversations, you help people to understand that. So again, I like having the conversations and having those talks, but a lot of times, they think it's a one-off. So like they'll see the situation with Bud and they'll be like, "Oh yeah, but that doesn't happen all the time." Or, the first question a lot of them ask is, "Yeah, but what happened before the video?" And I do know context matters, so I don't want to make it seem like it doesn't. But for us, it's like we go back to our own experiences.
It's
like,
everyday experience.
Yeah, I remember, I know what happened when there was no video.
Right.
I know what happened to me. So we automatically put ourselves in those shoes and feel like, it doesn't matter what happened before the video because that was uncalled for. And other people are like, "No, I want to know what happened." So I think a lot of times when you feel like you have to prove that you were mistreated, that it puts you in this position of thinking like everybody is like that officer, or everybody feels, the same way from the people that we experienced racism from, because if, how could you not understand where we're coming from when this happens regularly? It happens all the time. Like we all, before we had before we pushed play, I said, you gonna talk about your experiences? 'Cause I know you had some. You said, I for sure I had some.
Absolutely.
And all of us have. And everybody can't be making it up.
Yeah, and so
everybody can't be making it up.
So you also said something that was kind of key about educating individuals, and I think there's a fine line between education and then there's a fine line between action on the other side. And what I mean by this is, if you remember, I've worked in corporate America now, like I said, a full entrepreneur, but I've worked in corporate America for over 16, 17 years. I've been on various diversity boards. I've been on, I've also overseen several black employee resource groups. I remember when George Floyd was killed, and then there was a lot of, this is around the pandemic, they call it, uncivil arrest or whatever they deemed it, just around the country. This was one of the times where I seen a big corporate company that I work for and other companies, they were like, well, how can we be allies? Can you guys come up with a plan or a game plan or a lesson and this is and this? And then the more we got to thinking about it, we were like, well, first and foremost, I said, we can educate you on some things, but how about you guys come up with plans, because you know exactly what you need to do to be better for us or have better support for us. Why should we be the ones coming up with this plan or game plan? Because again, we don't think it should come from us. So I do think there's a fine line between educating to a certain point, but then when you start having allies, they need to take the ball and roll with it and make something happen. And that's how we build together, because now this is an agenda that is coming from you, that now we can come together and merge and talk about it and make this world a little bit better.
I'll tell you why I do like the fact that they ask, and I do feel like we should come up with the programs and stuff. The reason why I say that is because I take it to relationships. When I'm in a relationship, and we usually love how we want to be loved, right? But it may not be what speaks love to her, to the woman that I'm dating. So she has to teach me how to love her. And I feel like with this, sometimes it may not be right, but sometimes we have to teach people, what's racism to us, what's racist to us, what we don't appreciate, what feels like a lack of support. So I don't have an issue with that, and I appreciate anybody that's willing to have that conversation. But again, like I said, I don't knock people that feel like they shouldn't have to, because we shouldn't have to, but I feel like to get somewhere we do.
Well, that's what I said. So for example, we had a session about microaggressions, which I thought was great. It was led by black folks, and we let people know, like, hey, these microaggressions are in the workplace, and they may be subtle to you, or they may not even be on your radar, but to be a good corporate citizen, we need to be cognizant of everyone's feelings in this workplace. So there were some panel discussions on that. So educating, like, I'm all for educating from that perspective. But when we're talking about like an agenda, so for example, if you work on the department and budget time is coming around, and let's say you're a supervisor, you're going to know what's best for you and your employees or people who work under you, and getting this budget together. You know exactly what you need. You're not going to go 2 levels up and say, hey, can you write me a budget and then I can kind of do that. They're going to be expecting the budget to come from you. So I look at it in the same standpoint of, if someone number one, if they're showing up and they're truly genuinely like, hey, where can I start? What can I do? Maybe you can give them like a template, but it's for them to go amongst whomever, they're a group, and then basically say, okay, we check this off the box. We check this off the box. These are some of the things that we want to do and support, and we're all for it. We're going to open our arms. I mean, we're forgiving folks, and we're going to want to work together. But I think from that sense, something has to come from the other side, and then we bring that together, and then we make it work. But again, to your point, definitely education is going to be key. But when it comes to action plans, sometimes that other side, they're going to have their own action plans.
Yeah, take the initiative.
Yeah.
I get that. Before we get too far off topic, which this is still on topic, but we were talking about Driving While Bud, which is a play on Driving While Black. What was your first experience getting pulled over?
My first experience getting pulled over, it was twofold. So I had just got my vehicle. I probably was around 16 years old, and I remember I went to Northwest High School, but I lived down north, and I was driving to school or coming back from school, and I was on Swanson Parkway, and the cop like just flicked his lights on, and I'm like nervous. I'm like, I don't know what to do, and my mind is just racing, and wasn't speeding, wasn't doing anything, but the type of vehicle that I had an 81 two-door Caprice Classic, and he's looking at this, and he's like, well, you got to be up to something, and I'm like, officer, I don't know, and thankfully at the time, so my mom, very well connected, she was a sergeant down at corrections. My grandfather was head of the Mad Dads. We had some family connections with police, and it was one of those things. I think a phone call was made, and the next thing I know, the officer comes back, gives me my license, and he said, you just get out of here. So he was already on whatever type of time he was on. But then the second time, maybe about a week later, I was also working at the YMCA. So in between like football, I was a lifeguard up there. My vehicle was parked. All I had was some 6x9s in this vehicle. They were bumping. Somebody broke my window to try to steal them, and then I remember calling the police. They came and they were like questioning me, like I broke the window. I'm like, this is my car. So two experiences that was super close, but like I'll probably say the first time I got pulled over, I was around 16.
Man, the first time I got pulled over, we weren't even driving.
Wow.
Man, so I grew up in Miller Park. People call it Killer Park. So
right.
It can kind of be a different neighborhood sometimes. And me and my two best friends, Mark and Marcus, we used to walk everywhere. And we were teenagers. I might have been 14 or so at this time. And it's kind of colder out, so I got on my Detroit Lions pullover jacket, and, they had on what they had on. And we're walking on probably about maybe 28th and Fort.
Okay.
And it's three of us. It's nighttime. And a cop hits us with the lights. And we're like, walking. Like, what? So he pulls over, and he has us sit on the curb, and it's freezing cold out while he's running, asking our names and running names. And we're basically like, man, what's going on here? And he was like, oh, we had 3 robbery suspects, that we were looking for. And we're like, yeah, 3 robbery suspects, huh? Yeah, 3 robbery suspects. And, they're dressed like you guys. And he literally, I swear on my life, looked at us and just, like, as he looked at us, described what we had on. He had on a blue jacket. One guy had on a black hoodie, and one guy, and I'm like, come on, man, dude, it's not that many people around here for 3 people to be walking around dressed exactly like the guys you're looking for.
Right.
You hold us out here for 20 minutes or so, 25 minutes or so, and then it's just like, all right, have a good day, and just drive off. And I'm like, you just wanted to check us and see what we're up to, because we were some kids walking in the neighborhood.
Did he say, I hate your gums because they black too?
Nah, he didn't say that. He didn't say that.
So how old were you in that situation?
Probably about 14.
That's crazy.
We weren't even driving. We were just walking.
Yeah.
And that happened, man, because we walked all the time. Because what happened is we were the good kids in the neighborhood. Like,
yeah.
I was a Christian rapper,
right.
and we all went to church together. We were in youth groups. And so when things would go wrong, or we had, situations in life, we'd be like, hey, man, you want to take that walk? That means I need to talk. I got to get some things off my chest. I need to talk. And we would just go walking. We'd walk up to the grocery store for no reason, or Blockbuster Music for no reason, but we would walk and just talk, because that's how we, got our emotions out. And I can't tell you how many times that probably happened at least 5 times, in my young adult life, my young life, to where we fit the description. It's like we always fit the description. And I'm
always.
Like, always.
And the crazy thing is, I fit the description multiple times, at least probably 4 or 5 times in my life. One time in particular, I was actually active duty, stationed in Jacksonville, North Carolina, Onslow Beach County. They ended up pulling me over in a Taco Bell. I'm actually in the Taco Bell, placing an order. They come out. They were like, yeah, we heard shots fired. you guys, or no, I think it was just me at the time. He was like, yeah, you need to get out the vehicle. The lights are flashing. I had guns drawn on me, mind you. Like, I'm like, what is going on? And back then, I still got my ways, but I used to have the 360s going. I used to always wear my do-rag. So when I had my do-rag on, I always drive. You know, young kids, they do it all. My son does it. And since I had a do-rag on and I looked a certain way, oh, I have to be up to something. You definitely fit the description. So I'm out of the car. Finally, they kind of put their guns back in their holster, start checking my ID. And I said, hey, sir, if you look in my pocket, my ID is right here. And I knew I had my license and I had my military ID together. So they pulled it out. They looked at it. At the time, I think I was working for a colonel. So he was the commanding officer for this training facility, this base that we were on. Great rapport with him. I got meritoriously promoted to corporal. Like, everything was good on that side. They looked at my ID. He looked at me again. And then they went over to start whispering. And I think the only saving grace was my military ID. And they started looking, because now they're thinking about the consequences. Because if they were to do something, that's a whole nother monster that they had to get into. So I think that was a saving grace in that particular that time. And then another time, I remember, and I called my mom. I was hot. I was crying. I was frustrated because I'm like, I easily could have lost my life because I fit the description. And I had no gun. I had nothing on at the time. I didn't even own a weapon. I mean, I had the military rifle that I was issued, but you only get that when you're out and you check it out from the armory. So I called her. She kind of talked me down. We had that discussion, and it was just like, man, I fit the description. I had guns pulled on me until I showed an ID that was fine or good enough for them to get off of my back. And I had a couple other experiences there. I got pulled over by a black cop, and this dude, they say we technically as black folks, I think to be racist, you have to have some type of power. But this dude was racist. This big, huge black cop from the country pulls me over and was like, yeah, mind you, he's across the street. I'm over here. I'm in my Camaro, always buckled up. Your seatbelt was off. I'm like, my seatbelt wasn't off, man. What are you talking? He's like, oh, you trying to get tough with me? Like, he was going there. I'm like, what are you doing? He ran my plates, seen my ID, figured I was in the military. He's like, yeah, you just get out of here. And I'm like, is this like, why am I experiencing this? This is a crazy experience just because of the color of my skin. And it does something to you. You know what I'm saying? It makes you a little bit more aware, sometimes a little bit more militant. And then that's where you get this disconnect between police officers and members of the black community, because there's a lack of trust there. And if anything, we need to try to build that. But how do you start? Like, and again, it goes back to my early statement. When you see police officers, maybe you don't live in that community, but you're doing things in the community to let the community know, like, hey, I'm here. I'm trying to build this rapport. And then you get members of the community like, okay, cool, you good, and we work this out together. That's what's lacking. And I think, again, we see this play out so many times in just different cities. You just name a different city and you have a high black population, it's going to continue to happen.
You know, and I think, too, what you said about being active in the community, I want to say his name was Officer Tommy something.
Oh, down south.
Down south.
Yeah, he's very active.
And he had these videos up to, like, he pulled up to this little girl or maybe a little boy, but they were in like a toy car, and they take off running. He takes off running after them. And some people were upset by that. They were like, you know, what are you teaching? But the family, the child, the neighborhood, the community, they all love him. They loved it. And it's like, no, he's coming out here playing with the kids. I think we need more officers like that,
right,
that build relationships with the areas that they work. You know, that they and I know there are some that do that. I don't want to imply that. I actually want to say this. I personally think the majority of police officers are good people who want to do a good job. So I don't think the majority are racist and waiting to pull somebody over, but I think we have bad people at every profession, and the bad ones make it hard to trust anybody because they wear the same uniform.
And it's even worse if you have a bad or a rogue police officer that is in a position to affect change, whether negative or positive, because if you're in an administrative role and you have this thought process, anything can go. I mean, I've heard stories of things that happen, and this is, I think, before the chief of police that we have now, but just from the 90s, there were squads, these gang squads that
jump out boys
that
squads,
would literally seek out black people to go mess with them and do nefarious whatever. I may plant some dope on you. I may do this. Now, these are stories, but there's a lot of people that corroborate this. These things happen, but across the nation. And unfortunately, we don't have representation in the legal. Like, it costs money to get lawyers. Even if you didn't do anything and now you're bumped up, now you're just another number. You have to fight the case. Now it's your word versus their word.
Which a lot of times our people take pleas because I'd rather do 5 years of probation or 2 years in jail than risk 20.
And
you know,
and a lot of times they may not even be the culprit of what this crime is. It's just their circumstance because they don't know the law. They don't know what their rights are at times. And that's why it goes back to trying to educate yourself the best you can. If you have a bad experience, let's just say you get pulled over and you're so frustrated and furious, do what you need to do to survive. But when you get home, just like you could jump on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, whatever, how about you jump on Google and start saying, like, okay, this is my experience. Educate yourself so the next time, or you can pass this information on, people know your rights. Now you're a little bit more even playing ground, and at some point you may want to jump into law enforcement. You may want to be a lawyer, or you may want to be that activist that has people's backs, and you're saying, like, nope, this is not right. These are some things that you can do, and this is by the book.
And I want to say this too, and this comes from working in the prison system. If we had a inmate who was always into something, you know, they were a headache, like they were acting up, and it was a privilege to be at our prison because it was considered a minimum security prison. So it was better than being at like Tecumseh and stuff for a lot of people. So what we had to do was get a paper trail. We had to always write him up if he did something wrong. So, like, usually if a guy did something, I always went and talked to him. Like, hey, man, you know, you can't do that. Oh, my bad, Gentry. I won't do it again. All right, cool. Well, if it was somebody that I don't want to say didn't belong there, but they were creating issues there and they wanted to get rid of them, they would tell guards, you know, make sure you write him up for everything. Because once you develop a paper trail, they can say, hey, listen, clearly he's not doing well enough to where he should be at a minimum security prison. We need to send him somewhere where there's more resources for him. But we have to do that in return.
Right.
So what I mean is when you have a bad experience with an officer, you know, even if it's not to the level of calling the news or posting it on Facebook, if you have a bad experience with an officer, go down and file a report. Go down and put it on paper, because that way, for those officers that are the bad ones, when they have the big situations, now they can go back and see, yeah, you know, nothing was done. Because a lot of people feel like, well, they're not going to do anything. Well, you're right. They may not do anything, especially if it was something that's considered small. But when the big situation happens and he has 25, write-ups, complaints, then it does matter. And then you do put the chiefs like smarter. You put in a position where they can actually do something about it, because now they can say, well, listen, this person is just not a good fit here. Look at all these complaints that we're having on them. You know, so I do feel like we have to do our part too, where when you have a bad experience, take the time, even though you feel like it's not going to matter, it could matter later.
So I would, to your point, I would probably say, if you feel intimidated, because a lot of times you will get officers that can voice their opinion, make you feel intimidated. What do you think that they should do in that situation? From my vantage point, you should probably, if you can, identify any markings on their police car, notate it, write it down, whatever you need to do. If you scared enough you can't get their badge number or their name, because at a bare minimum, you should be able to ask, what's your badge number? What is your name? But if it's a hostile situation, again, try to get out of that situation the best that you can. Look at some identifying marks, write it down, write your statement, and then, like you said, call in the morning or whenever, file that police report, and then just go from there. And they should be able to give you that name.
Right, and also write down the date and time where you were pulled over.
Yep.
Because there should be, record that you were pulled over.
Especially when as soon as the lights come on, I think that sends some type of signal for cameras to come on. Ask to get the video from that interaction. There's several things that you can do.
Right. But again, the main thing is, like you said, survive the encounter. Like I tell my sons when we go through our protocol of what happens when you get pulled over, I tell them, listen, even if you're right, don't admit fault. But if you're right, be respectful. Take the ticket, whatever. We'll fight it in court later.
Right.
The place to fight whether I'm right or wrong is not on the side of the road while you're being pulled over.
Because it's your word versus their word.
Right.
Anything can happen at the split second.
Right. Just at that moment, it's just survive the encounter.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, again, I think the ultimate way that we change it is by policing our own community, and people have to apply for those jobs when they're hiring. Get out there and apply. Get out there and apply, because I know a lot of. I'm friends with a lot of good police officers, black, white, Hispanic, female, it doesn't matter. I know a lot of good officers. So that's why I say I don't want to make this a bashing officer thing. But I think that if you're going to police our community, that you really have to be cognizant of the history and the traumas that have been that are related to a lot of these situations.
And then you said one thing about just applying. I think it's another step on top of that, because you can have. I remember there was one point in time, a couple times, but early. I think right as I was getting out the military, I had aspirations of joining the police force, and it was one of those things where it's like, okay, I can go apply. But you apply, then you have this test. There's so many different things that you need to do, but a lot of people don't know about. You guys, the firefighters, do a great job about seeking out applicants or trying to identify applicants who may need some additional study material or who needs a study group, because that's a big barrier as well, because applying is one thing, but applying with purpose or having the support to try to see you through that finish line is something completely different. So I think a lot of people kind of miss that, and they may just apply the first go around, nothing, they take a test, they bomb it, and now they get discouraged, and now they're doing something completely different. So I think it also works back with applying is one thing, but then trying to seek out whatever support group to try to get you over that hurdle or that hump to get the success that you need.
Right. And with us, I'm the vice president of the Black Firefighters Association here in Omaha, and there's a Black Police Officers Association. So they might have mentor programs also, because we mentor people through the application process. So that's a great point. Look that out. Before we get, because we're going to be in here soon, before we get too far, I do have a question for you.
All right.
You talked about getting pulled over and how upset you were, and your mom had that talk with you. Talk me through that talk.
Oh, yeah. So Jacksonville, North Carolina, I like I said, ended up getting pulled out at gunpoint, thinking I'm about to lose my life. Like, I've never had that happen to me. So
before we do the talk, how did that feel, having a gun pulled on you?
Man, it
for a traffic violation.
My heart dropped down to my ankles. I mean, I literally thought I was going to lose my life over a traffic stop that I had nothing to do with. Like I said, they basically, at long short, they were like, yeah, you fit the description. We heard about some type of disturbance in the area, and we seen you, and this is what this was. I think at the time, I'm a big car guy, so at the time I might have been driving like a Cutlass, like an 87 Cutlass. So again, the stigma or perception, if he's driving a Cutlass, he's got to be up to no good, because only people who drive Cutlasses that look like that are up to no good. So got pulled out. They didn't cuff me, but I'm literally, they're patting me down. Guns are drawn. They told me to turn around, and I'm literally staring down this barrel, and my eyes are wide. I just don't know what to think. And I'm like, okay, this is it. And I think I was saying prayers in my head, and I was just like, Lord, let me get through this. So after they finally kind of start putting them down, and I said, just reach in my pocket. I have nothing. My hands are up. Reach in my pocket, and you'll see my ID. And once they did that, then everything kind of de-escalated. But then it put a thought. It kind of put anger in me. I'm like, hold up. So you mean to tell me if I didn't have a military ID on me, then it had been up. It had been a whole different situation. But now that I do, and I still kept my mouth shut, because I'm like, I still don't know what they're going to do. They still can circle back. And after I got out of that situation, I called. I had this heated conversation. She was upset, I know, but she was able to kind of like talk me down and just say, hey, this is us living in America. This is very unfortunate. You should probably say something to your command. And I think I did. I gave him a heads up, and it was one of those things that I was like, hey, this was the situation. They thought that I fit the description. And thankfully, he was super cool. He was like, hey, I'm sorry that you had to go through that, but if we hear anything, we'll follow up. But nothing ever happened. They never reached out, and that was pretty much it.
Yeah. I remember I was at the Tilt. There used to be a Tilt, the gaming room at the bottom level of the West Rose Mall.
Okay.
And I used to wear my pants leg rolled up. I used to wear bandanas, my pants leg rolled up. Used to put my little pager on the pants leg. I thought I was the man. And I was down there, and I guess a cop saw me, and they considered that gang related. So he was yelling for me But I didn't. There's 100 kids down here. I didn't know he was talking to me.
Right.
So he walks up and he has this attitude. He's like, "Hey, you," and I was like, "Excuse me." He's like, "Put your pants leg down." I said, "Excuse me." He's like, "Put your pants leg down. That's gang related. Put your pants leg down." And I was like, "Okay." So I started rolling it down. He just kind of like going off on me. And I said, "What's your problem?" And he was like, and I'm 17 at the time. He was like, "You heard me calling you. I was saying, hey, you." And I said, "My name is not hey, you." I said, "I'm not disrespectful. I would not have ignored you. I didn't know you were talking to me." And he said, "Well, just put your pants leg down." And I said, "Man, I really don't like your attitude." And I said, "What's your name and badge number?" And he was like, "It's right there." And I said, now he probably thought I was being a jerk when I said this. I wasn't being a jerk. It's just, I don't know. I didn't have situational awareness to say something better. But I was like, "Well, do you have a pen and piece of paper I could use?" And he was like, "No." And he walks off. So I go to the counter and I get a piece of paper and a pen. And I go back up to him and I say, "I have some paper now. What's your name and badge number?" He's like, "It's right there." I never forget. His name is Officer Gustafson. Got to be retired by now because this is, 31 years ago. But, and when I write it down, I said, "Man, I really don't like your attitude." And he said, "That's it. You're gone." He didn't ask me to leave. He didn't ask me to call a parent. He didn't say, "I'm escorting you out." He literally grabbed me by the back of my neck and drugged me up the escalator. So as he's dragging me out of the mall through the escalator, again, didn't ask me to leave, didn't ask me to exit the premises, nothing. Just grabbed me and drug me out. I pull out my cell phone and I call the police. And the woman on the operator is like, "Is that him yelling?" I said, "Yes, ma'am." And she said, "Unfortunately, you cannot call the police on the police."
That's crazy.
Which is crazy. And she said, "But I advise you to go downtown and file a complaint." So I got kicked out the mall. I got banned and barred for a year, even though I worked at the mall, worked at the finish line, for no reason.
So you couldn't go back to work?
Well, I did, but I
Okay.
just snuck in. Like if I saw the cops, I'd walk the other way.
Okay.
So I
okay.
did still go to work, but I literally just went to work and left. I didn't hang out the mall and do anything like that because I didn't want to get trespassing.
Right.
Even though I was trespassing because I was going to work. But yeah, so I took 2 buses. I didn't have a car. I took 2 buses downtown to go file a complaint on him. As a kid, not because my mom told me to or people told me to, because I felt that was wrong. And I bring that up because I want people to understand that we were the good kids.
Oh yeah,
We
anything.
weren't the gang members. We weren't the kids out here thugging. I wasn't smoking weed. I wasn't
Nope.
carrying guns. And we've had this experience. Like there's very few black people, no matter your economic status,
It don't
no matter
matter.
where you're born and raised, no matter your bloodline, we all have experiences like this.
Right.
And that's why driving while black is such an issue. And then when you see the George Floyds, when you see the Sandras, when you see the Castros, when you see these things happen, when those lights hit up behind you, man, your knuckles get tense on that wheel. You start thinking, where do I put my hands? Should I get my ID out now? Are they going to think I'm fumbling for something? When they come to the car, you don't want to move.
Right.
I
because
think
anything that you do could set something off.
right. I think that comment was made about the Bud situation where somebody said that the cop told him to get out the car and buckle your seatbelt, and he's like, "I'm not unbuckling anything."
Yeah, he ain't gonna touch it.
Yeah, because we know that becomes now the reason why you can say I was in fear for my life.
Right.
There was a gun on the floor and he was reaching for it.
Right.
We've seen blacks murdered because
Gardner.
they had cell phones.
Cigarettes.
Yeah, cigarettes.
Yeah.
Or they had a cell phone. They thought the gun, the cell phone was a gun.
Tamir Rice, a
Little
kid.
a child. So when you see all these examples, and this has been going on for so long,
Emmett Till.
at some point we develop these trauma responses to where it's you go into fight or flight just from a traffic stop because that traffic stop can be your last.
Right. But you hit it on the head. Definitely, if you can file a police report. I think in that situation, my nerves are just so bad. I didn't even realize, and I was super young, but I didn't even file a police report. But that's something that I would probably say that is good to start that paper trail, get your thoughts down, and just do it. And the last time that I was pulled over a couple years ago, just got a Regal. I told you I'm in the old schools. I'm cruising down the street. Not in my 6'4". No. So I'm cruising down the street. I'm actually going to Wingstop. I just got the car that day in transits. This cop was like ahead of me, pulls me over, and I'm like, why are you pulling me over? And then she was just like, oh, yeah, you don't have any weed on you, do you? I'm like, woman, I'm in my 40s. I ain't got time. Like, what are you talking about? And it was just, oh, well, yeah. Then she made references to this kind of car. Thankfully, somebody in my neighborhood, he's on the force, pretty high up on the force. I said, hey, man, can you pull the tape on this? Because I had a bad interaction. I definitely want to file a police report. And it was so funny because he did his thing. He's actually was in investigations, over investigations. He said, yeah, man, you was right. This is and this. And they had a talk with her. But it's just funny. Like, I think people in general don't know who you know. So I think everybody needs to treat people with some type of respect and dignity. And I don't know why you would lead off with, oh, do you have weed? Like folks who drive these type of cars normally do. And I'm like, woman, what are you talking about? I can't enjoy. So that particular car, now if I'd have brought my 67 out, would have been something different. So it's just like when you're policing or you're amongst folks, like, let's just think first. Use your common sense and then go from there. If you need an escalator to go one up, which they teach you, okay, do that. But from a common pull over or you know what I'm saying, a common stop, man, we got to use better judgment.
Right. And I want to say this too, to a lot of my white friends that are out there who do want to be supportive. A couple of things that I would like to see you do to be supportive, if you want to support, is stop with the, I need to know what happened before the recording started. Again, I think it's okay to want to know what happened. I think it's okay if you want to reserve comment until you know what happened. But when you lead with that and you lead like, I don't believe you or you have to prove it to me, I think it really makes people feel like you're looking for the excuse to minimize my experience. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a bad way to start off. Right. I also want to say too that a lot of people don't realize there used to be a big talk about white privilege, and we consider this like that type of situation. Like when you're white and you get pulled over, a lot of times you get the benefit of the doubt that you were just speeding, right, that there was nothing but speeding involved or whatever the infraction was, and we don't get that same benefit of the doubt. We get questioned on what else we have in the car, you know, or the guns and drugs in the car. Like we get those type of questions. We don't get that benefit of the doubt. And I bring that up because I had wrote just my thoughts down at one point, and a friend of mine recommended that I post it, and I did post this a while back, but I just wanted to read it as we're coming to a close here because I think it matters. But it says, is it a privilege to breathe? Most would say no, unless someone is choking you. Then breathing would definitely be a privilege. The point is that until you have been deprived of something, you don't realize the privilege it is to have it. My white friends and family will never understand white privilege because they have never been without it. They have never been deprived of the things minorities were deprived of in order to understand it. Some would say slavery was years ago, but we are all equal now. The thing they don't understand is the advantages that those times still provide many of my white friends today. It provided many with generational wealth, and in those days, wealth equated to education and knowledge. So your bloodline not only had more, but they knew more and were able to pass that down along with the money, land, companies, social classes, and the psychological views or shackles. All of these things that were passed down knowingly and unknowingly provided a head start and an advantage that many minorities are simply trying to catch up to today. To those that disagree, if a man has two sons and when he passes away, he leaves one son $100,000, the family home, and the stories of how wonderful he is as a son, how hard he works, and how trustworthy he is, then it is the other son no money, no home, and stories saying that he is lazy, a thief, and a liar. Which son would you pick to be more successful as time passed? Sure, the second son can grow to be more successful than his brother, who was given more, but how much harder is he going to have to work to overcome the things his brother would never understand or have to worry about? Some would say that the money and the home were the other son's only advantage, but our society gives jobs, loans, and friendships based on your name and how you're perceived. So ill words create an environment that's not conducive to success, but understand that those same advantages and disadvantages were thrust upon us at birth based on the color of our skin. So speaking out against these things does not keep racism alive, as some claim. What it does is it brings to light the things that most minorities desire to see changed. How can we address issues that we either aren't aware of or issues we simply want to pretend are long gone? I don't blame you for not understanding the privilege of breath as long as you stop blaming me for the desire to no longer be choked. And I wrote that because I wanted I have a lot of friends that I feel aren't racist, so they don't understand racism. They feel like there has to be something else to it. There has to be more to the story. It couldn't have been because it was your race, because they don't think through the eyes of a racist. And I just want them to know that even though you don't see it because you don't understand it, doesn't mean that it doesn't happen.
Right.
And that when we go through these experiences and we share these experiences, just sit down and listen and just sometimes believe us, because everybody can't be wrong.
Right. And if you don't put yourself in someone else's shoes, you're never really going to understand what's going on. You won't fully understand, but you at least get some type of insight, because, again, racism is a system. And if this system is controlled by the racists, then there are going to be some times where, you don't experience what other folks go through. So just take that time to try to get into their mind, or take that time out to say, hey, well, what does this look like? If you want to inquire and ask some questions, okay, cool. If somebody's willing to give you that insight, but you got this thing called Google or the internet, start from there. Start researching. Start doing your own work, because when you are a student of something, you're going to retain it a lot better versus somebody just regurgitate. Don't take my word for it. Don't take his word for it. Go do your own research if you truly want to make some change. And I think that's where I would go and recommend, if somebody says, well, how can I help? Just start doing some research, see what it actually is, and you get a bigger picture, and then you can kind of interject where you think that you can help someone out in the community.
I agree. Well, we're going to come to a close on that. I do want to say to anybody out there listening, I do encourage you that if you want to see a change, to apply for the positions, apply for the jobs. I do think that makes the biggest impact is when we are policing our own community. And to anybody over there who is going to go through what Terrance Crawford just went through, what many of us have went through our whole lives, just survive the encounter.
Yep.
Survive the encounter.
Yep. You said it best, man. I think this is an episode that definitely was needed, at least to get a little clear the air, get some things off of our chest and share our experiences. But also, if you're going through something, at the end of the day, like you said, survive, write down whatever's going on, and then start that process and start educating yourself. The more you know, hopefully the better you'll be in a situation, and you'll leave that situation and go home safe.
I agree. Well, that was today's episode. Like always, please join the conversation. As a matter of fact, because I want people to realize that this isn't a one-off, that we all have been through this. When you comment your experience. Talk about what you went through when the first time you were pulled over, how you felt, the things that you went through. So join the conversation, like and subscribe. We need the subscribers. And until next time, guys, that was our episode. Y'all have a good day.
All right, peace.
Peace.